Next Curve.
Welcome to another episode of Next Curve's Rethink podcast, where tech industry thought leaders discuss the trends and the technologies that are shaping our digital future. I'm Leonard Lee, Managing Director and founder of Next Curve, and today I'm happy to have a very special guest, Virgilio Fiorese. Did I get that right?
All good.
Yeah, awesome. An all-around tech guru, telco industry aficionado, LinkedIn friend who has a particular passion. And I never really quite understood this, but you have a passion for connecting our rural communities and very remote spots where almost nobody lives.
Yep.
Correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Great.
Right.
So welcome. And do you want to share a little bit about your background? I don't know if I've covered everything. I don't think I have.
25 plus years in the telco industry. I mean, telco industry was always my industry. I started all the way back in 1994, pretty much doing the installations of class 5 switches. So what today's we rarely see, that's the wireline phone. That was my life on the early stage of my career, was to go to those rural communities and to install switches that would connect like 100 to 200 homes. And one of the most important things that we would do on those rural communities would be to install a public phone. That one that the kids would never see. Yeah, I did a lot of those. So people would put the coin and we stay on the phone like it lining up to make a call. That was my life. A lot of fun during that time. And then I was involved on telco when mobile technology just arose, right? I mean, when it came. So I had the opportunity to deploy the first TDMA sites in Brazil. We would make a lot of fun, like, hey, we have another site on the air. People complain today about the coverage. During that time, we would be happy when we say, hey, we have coverage in that specific neighborhood. Yeah. Oh, let's go everyone there to make a call. So it was super fun, good times. Nowadays, it's so easy to access everything on the smartphone. During those times, we were happy to have what's called the mobile terminated SMS. So it was a mobile phone that would only receive SMS, would not send SMS. And then I worked with early stage of mobile internet access. People would never know, but a company called Openwave from Red Cities, they developed a protocol called the Uplink that afterwards it was standardized as the WAP protocol. And that was pretty much the prehistory of what we call today the mobile HTML protocol, right? The best that we could do during those times was pretty much very simple browsers where you needed to give like multiple clicks to get to the content that you wanted. But it was a learning curve. I mean, a lot of learning curve until the arrival of the iPhone and all the eruption that came after that. That was my early career. And then I spent like 11 years in Ericsson.
That's where we met, right?
Yeah, exactly. And during those 11 years, man, a lot of good stuff in terms of deploying mobile technology in smaller countries in Latin America. And that started to trigger inside myself this passion to work with like the smaller carriers, not the traditional tier ones, and to try to understand their specific challenge related to expanding coverage on the rural zones outside the metro areas. And then it came, fast forwarding, when I joined the Ericsson regional carriers team, I started to develop all this relationship with the wireless internet service providers. So how can we expand the internet service using wireless technology? And I did a couple of projects on the satellite industry. And this is when I started to learn about LEO, GEOs, MEOs, and all the challenges around how to do satellite internet servicing. And that's it. And then now and finally now I'm working with fiber. So I'm trying. Full
circle.
So I'm trying all the types of different access, and I would like to serve my customers, to serve my community trying to give them the perspective of all these different technologies. So I know that there is no silver bullet, there is no single solution that will solve all our problems. The best I can do is to help them, to guide them where they should use solution A, B, or C.
That's a wonderful story. That's a really, really great setup on your background. That's awesome. I do have a question, though. Are you going to be connecting that barn behind you? Is that why you're out there?
So that's one of the challenges. So you see that here behind me, we have all this foliage, right?
Yeah.
So imagine that the tower was behind all those foliage. In that case, the wireless technology may be a challenge if you are not working with, for example, with the low band, right?
Yeah.
If you're thinking about it mid-band, because here, I mean, in this scenario, you don't see fiber and you don't see microwave, okay? You don't see millimeter wave. The best that you can do in this scenario is either a mid-band or a low band, or in the extreme situation, satellite, right? So understanding that, you need to try to test some models. So depending on the type of mid-band you have, and depending on the type of technology you have, like if you can use, like for example, multi-user MIMO with some high power radios, potentially we could connect the barn behind the trees. You know, now, if that technology does not work out, can I use it, for example, like what Timo is doing, that they are doing like some fixed wireless with 600? Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's a good alternative. Yeah. Even Microsoft is trying that with the low band on TV white space. Now, Now, if you are talking about 600 in this type of scenario, you may not have enough bandwidth to offer a reasonable service. So then it goes to that small percentage of situation where Mr. Elon Musk has a big eyes, right? I mean, so potentially like a farm like that would be a perfect scenario to receive what the people is misunderstanding as his 5 million Earth stations. I mean, so it's not exactly Earth stations. I mean, he filled the paperwork to FCC because the stations are in the Earth, but there is a misconception, because when we talk about the Earth station in the satellite industry, those are those large feeder links that we see. Right? But when Elon Musk is talking about 5 million Earth stations, he's pretty much talking about the CPEs, so the rooftop antennas that we could put, for example, on that bar. Okay.
Well, you've just steamrolled our agenda, so we'll have to back up a little bit to remind people, or at least tell them why we're having this podcast, right? So this is awesome. So look, I always follow you on LinkedIn. I love your posts. And for people who don't think that LinkedIn is a great place to learn techno stuff and be able to interface and hear the thought leadership and the great thinking of the many experts that are on LinkedIn, well, you're wrong. Virgilio, you're definitely one of them. I know that you're very well respected in the industry. I see it through the engagement with your content. And you're just a really cool guy. But let's let the audience know what we're going to be talking about here. And you've already touched on several of the points, the first of which is sort of the rural broadband or the remote access challenge, right? And some of the technologies and the constraints and the opportunities that might be out there. So we'll talk about that a little bit. The next thing is the satellite stuff that you just mentioned and the big excitement over Starlink and Project Kuiper, I think that's how you pronounce it. That's Jeff Bezos' effort to put a constellation of LEO satellites, or low Earth orbit satellites, out into space in a large constellation to provide quote unquote ubiquitous broadband connectivity. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but you made a few really interesting comments and posts on LinkedIn regarding what are the monetization possibilities, and what would those types of opportunities from a, let's say, a services perspective or a business model perspective that might support some of these forecasts about Starlink and its prospects? And then finally, maybe we just talk about, well, what are the future opportunities in the applications? Because you and I have had some exchanges about that, and we'll share with the audience. So with that, let's, did we cover everything you want to talk about rural? You ended it with fiber, and that's always the challenge, right? In the rural, remote areas, very difficult and costly to get stuff out there. I mean, are you seeing anything like in terms of new advancements in either technology? Because I know you said technology is cheap at one point, but maybe the build out or the site acquisition, what have you.
You're right. You're spot on. What happens is that what I'm learning working now on the fiber access, it is that there are some key players on this industry that can make a huge difference on making it possible or not possible to distribute fiber to not to the far remote, but like to, let's put it this way, to the nearby rural areas around any small city. So we need to recap a little bit of the history. So we go in the beginning of the last century when we had the process of electrification. The challenge was very similar to fiber, okay? How we get our grid as further as possible closer to the people that needs electricity, right?
Yeah.
And during that time, it showed one type of, let's put it this way, a PPP type of formation that is called the electrical cooperatives. And pretty much the electrical cooperatives, it is a mix of like local farmers that wanted to solve the problem of that community, combined with some local technical expertise, combined with the public wish to solve the problem. So when those guys got together, they formed these electrical co-ops that started to overcome challenges like reducing the cost of construction, getting proper rights to use. And they made it. I mean, if we see the numbers, close to 100% of the households in the US today has electricity. If we fast forward to around on the 50s, around that, you will start to see the rise of telephony co-ops. So we learned with the electrical co-ops, and then we formed this new type of entity called the telephony co-ops that would not extend the grid, but they would extend the copper wire as close as possible to as many as homes as possible in the US, and we would build the voice telephony, right? So now, if I fast forward to my situation right now, what I see is that with the learnings of the electrical co-ops, with the learnings of the telephone co-ops, and with a lot of local entrepreneurs, with a lot of wish to solve this problem inside the WISPs and the FISPs. I mean, for people that doesn't know, WISPs are wireless internet service providers and FISPs are fiber internet service providers. Those are regional players. They operate on markets where they can address like between 1,000 homes to 10,000 homes. A handful of them would go to like 100,000 homes. But most of those guys, they play on this niche market. But those entities, together with the electrical co-ops, together with the telephone co-ops, they build a strong community with a lot of expertise on the rural challenge. So it is very difficult for a company that has a headquarter here in Dallas or in Atlanta, like AT&T, to understand the nuances of all those rural communities and all these different policymakers. Like I told to you, I can help with a certain level of the technology, so I can reduce the cost barriers that we face on technology like GPON, XGS-PON to the home, but I cannot solve the entire problem because some of the problem to extend the fiber is related to construction, is related to lack of labor, and is related to political decisions that would facilitate rights of use for pole attachment, for streets where you need to pass conduits and all that. Right. And I'm seeing a lot of creative solutions like community conduit. So you do only, and you saw that from the Google announcement, right? So the city is building the community conduit. And inside the conduit, Google is the first one that's going to pass the fiber. But then any other player that would like to use the same conduit can go and pass the fiber. That will reduce a lot the cost of the fiber to the home project. Right. So I think that there are a lot of to do and on the fiber space. And this is what I'm going to call the mid-mile. So the mid-rural okay? And on the edge of that mid-rural, where I cannot go to fiber, as you know, I have in on my personal pocket of knowledge how we can use the fixed wireless access, right? How we can use CBRS, how we can use unlicensed spectrum, and where I cannot go with the extension of the fiber and with the extra mile of the wireless technology, then I'm going to appeal for the satellite. And this is where we need to discuss the economics of that.
I know how challenging it can be to get connectivity out in the middle of the Yukon, because I actually drove from San Diego all the way up to Fairbanks, Alaska, and I hit a very, 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 very large patch of like no connectivity. And so thankfully I downloaded a ton of music on my iPad, so I always had tunes with me. What was that?
Download the maps as well.
Well, no. There's only one road, so you can't really get lost, right? By the way, anybody who really wants to know how to get from San Diego to Fairbanks, Alaska, going up the Alaskan Highway, I've done it, so give me a call. I will advise you. I'll be your Sherpa. Really quickly, I wanted to touch on 5G because you mentioned FWA. There's a lot of excitement, but it's a little bit hypey. Yeah, so we hear a lot about 5G being able to address, quote unquote, address the rural connectivity issue and provide a broadband solution. You mentioned FWA, which is fixed wireless access. You mentioned unlicensed spectrum, although that's not really it. But what are some of your thoughts there? What's quote unquote 5G's role in bringing the 5G promise, if you will, to that barn behind you?
I think that we need to understand that 5G is not about a spectrum, right? I mean, 5G is about a new standard, a new type of radio interface, a new type of a packet core. And in that sense, you can still take advantage of the 5G increasing on the spectral efficiency, even if you are operating on low band, mid band. You don't need to be stuck on the millimeter wave portion of the spectrum, right? So talking about the barn. In that barn, I don't expect that we are going to reach that type of environment with millimeter wave, okay? Forget about it. I mean, that's not the idea. So when we see FWA on millimeter wave, these are urban and suburban scenarios where we do have the fiber, okay? And that's very important because people forget about it. I mean, if I needed to do FWA with all the capacity that we can do on millimeter wave, I needed to have a very strong backhaul.
Yes.
And that comes from fiber. So in suburban, in urban areas, we do have enough fiber. If we don't have enough fiber, we have a good business case to deploy fiber. And then we are going to use the millimeter wave FWA as that last mile that facilitates for service providers to reach out to the household, okay?
Right.
So instead of going to a challenge of like getting HOA approvals and then going to a challenge of like doing fiber fishing inside the home and all that, you can take advantage of putting a rooftop CPE and like then half a mile, 1 mile, you can have one FWA on millimeter wave radio to do this last connection that we need for this almost fiber service. Okay, so now we do have the famous mid-band, and everyone worldwide is doing all the 5G projects on mid-band. Unfortunately, the US was not ready to make available enough mid-band for all the 5G players. So I would say that on a lucky and smart move, Sprint had a lot of mid-band available where they could transition to T-Mobile. So T-Mobile can have the luxury of using the 2.5, half for 5G, half for LTE, because they have so much that they can do that. And now, when we go to the other players, the first spectrum that we would have available for 5G would be the CBRS, but that was already committed to be firstly used on LTE. And I believe that over time, a lot of these LTE CBRS projects will migrate to 5G. Okay, that's what I believe. Now, the government is putting a lot of priority, and I would say that I totally agree on clearing the C-band, okay, for 5G. And this week, they announced that another 100 megahertz below the CBRS,
Yeah.
right?
Are you talking about the military stuff?
Exactly.
That Rob Tiffany posted?
Yep, yeah, he loves that one. Yep.
Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah. So there's satellite spectrum. There's, a lot of military use spectrum in the mid-band, right? And a lot of that being sort of rethought and
the data spectrum that you can that allows us to easily go over 3 miles, 5 miles coverage.
Yeah.
Single site. So it is very helpful for this scenario of fixed wireless access and also to the mobile. Mid-band is the golden egg of the spectrum. No doubt about it.
And then I'll just comment really quickly. Maybe we can have a separate podcast on this. Maybe invite some friends. Is the integrated access backhaul, right? And,
that's wonderful. I agree. That's wonderful. I mean, for people that it doesn't know, man, that is a technology that it's not exactly mesh, but
it's mesh on steroids. It's super mesh, right?
But it is interesting because what happens is that millimeter wave, you have so much spectrum millimeter wave that you can carve a portion of the millimeter wave spectrum only to allow to do a wireless backhaul with another site. So then what that means is that the backhaul itself or the fiber itself don't need to go all the way to the last site. You can have like a chain of millimeter wave sites connected to a single fiber. So it's very interesting. I agree. Very good.
Okay, so let's move on to satellite. Of course, everyone's excited about Starlink. And when I first heard about it, I thought, what's going on here? This is like something straight out of some science fiction movie. But this is really Elon Musk's, I don't know if you can call it a pet project, but it's probably more than a pet project because it's real now, right? But he's using his SpaceX reusable rockets to launch what's going to be a massive constellation of these communication satellites, these small microwave size 500-pound satellites that are going to be launched into low Earth orbit, or LEO, and that's why they call it LEO. And there's going to be, I was astonished. There's going to be, they got permission from the FCC, I think it was 2018, to launch 12,000 of these things. I thought it was only 3,000. And then he just got, like, in 2019, approval for another 30,000. So we're looking at 42,000 satellites. That's a lot of space junk. Yeah, I think Project Kuiper got approval 2 weeks ago, right, from the FCC. What are your thoughts there? I know that you have some questions about how this is all going to work out in terms of a viable business for Elon Musk.
Before that, I would like to clarify to a lot of people that if we unpeel the history of the LEOs, we are going to find some interesting projects before Starlink. So Elon was saying that Bezos likes to copy him. But Elon also was not really the first of thinking about the potential of LEO satellites, okay? So one of the most famous cases was actually OnWeb. Greg Wheeler and other guys, they got together, they started to, even SoftBank was involved, but they started to develop this LEO constellation called OnWeb that was actually, I think, around 1,000 of satellites that they requested for approval. They faced some financial challenge, and this is why I always go back to the economics of this business. They faced some financial challenge. They were sold, and looks like that a combination of the UK government and Indian telecom company acquired them, and potentially they can revive the OnWeb project. Also, almost in the same time frame, you can find inside of the archive of FCC that Boeing also requested approval to around 3,000 satellites. They never executed on that, but they asked for. Asked for. And then we have the other constellations like Telesat, like LeoSat, that were trying to approach these LEO projects from different perspectives, right? I think that what makes all difference in the case of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, it is, of course, the name they have, the financial power that they have to execute those projects and to wait until it has sustainable return, okay? But I would also say that they have a lot of influence on the policymakers. I mean, if you are following the art of projects, for people that doesn't know, rural development, I forgot the O, rural development fund. Okay, I forgot the O in the middle. But so if you, so I mean, I don't remember all the acronym, but if we. So RDOF is 24 billion funding for rural connectivity expansion. And the first initiative, FCC put a lot of emphasis on the needs of going over the high tiers of the speeds, like 1 gig and all that. And you read the first proposal, I mean, satellite was out, okay? It was completely out. Not only satellite, they also made it very difficult for the FWA players and all that. But then during the process of question and answers and the feedbacks, the FCC made the rules a little bit more flexible. And the truth is that now even Elon Musk with his constellation can actually go over this 24 billion fund. That's an important fund for the economics of those size of projects. You're right. I mean, I have a couple of questions. I think that in the technical community, they talk a lot about it, when we are going to start to see the communication between the satellites on the space proven to be working. So like they looks like that they are using laser technology in order to connect the mesh of the satellites on the space, but it's not really a proven technology right now. So this is one portion of the challenge. I told you that I think that really the biggest challenge is the economics of the subscriber acquisition. So the costs of the CPE, of the equipment that goes on the rooftop, the costs of the installation of those CPEs. Elon believes that this can be do yourself. I think that he is being very optimistic about the capability of everyone to go on a rooftop and to do the installation of. Okay.
Maybe he's assuming that everyone's going to get solar panels for their roofs.
I mean, And I told you that when I was reading about the solutions that Greg was trying to bring as part of the OnWeb project, one of the leaders' technology was actually the flat panel antennas, right? The FPA. And when I see now the prototypes of the Elon Musk pizza box, it does not look like an FPA, okay? It looks like more as a satellite dish with a motor on the bottom, right? So if you imagine like the motor adjusts to the best
satellite,
signal for the satellite, to track the satellite. So this type of a mechanical solution brings some challenge like MTBF, right? I mean, so like the lifetime of the product, right? And every time that you have questions about the lifetime of the project, you started to put on the business case, okay, if I don't pay back this investment on a certain time, in certain years, and I needed to replace that technology, this payback becomes infinitely impossible, right? And we don't like that type of scenario. So this is one part of the challenge. The other that we talked is every satellite has a specific capacity in terms of gigabits per second that carry over. And that volume of capacity per satellite will drive how many subscribers you can put per satellite without the overload. So you saw he became public saying, hey, Los Angeles, it's not my market. I think that he is right, because pretty much in what you have in orbit is that you have this sequence of satellites, and every satellite will create like a specific beam on the Earth. So those beams, they are kind of large. So if you have a large beam in LA, think that you may have like million subscribers that would like to sign for the service. That will not work out on the from satellite capacity perspective, right? So I was doing some napkins analysis, and I think that the numbers of subscribers that you can have per satellite, it is on the range of thousands. Okay,
Yeah, that's pretty
so
bad.
it's not bad. I mean, it's not bad. It is just like it's a number that you need to know.
Right, right,
And
right, right.
And I think that SpaceX knows, Starlink knows this number. So knowing the number of subscribers that you can have per satellite, you need to define a price point of the service that will pay back the satellite itself, the cost of the launch, and the subscriber acquisition cost. That is the
Right.
cost of the installation of the
Yeah.
equipment on the home, right?
Hmm.
And I honestly believe that the equipment will not be free of charge. I think that he needs the customer to put down some skin on the game,
Hmm.
some minimum commitment, and not only a minimum commitment on the installation of the equipment that goes on the home to reduce the payback of the equipment, but also a minimum commitment on how many months of service that the customer is committing. So then you can adjust the payback of the total project. Okay, so those are all assumptions on my side.
Hmm.
We don't know those numbers. We have seen some studies from Morgan Stanley, and I can tell you that Morgan Stanley it's kind of aligned with my way of thinking. And then you mentioned Vico, but don't forget the other use cases. So I think that I will let you talk about the other use cases that are not the rural
Well,
broadband, and
yeah.
I can complement that.
Oh no.
But you have a fair point. I think that some of the use cases are not exactly residential broadband. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the way I was looking at it. So here's the thing. You saw Elon Musk mention that this is going to be ideal for gaming, and I'm thinking, well, what kind of gaming? Is it like international gaming where you're competing with someone on the other side of the planet? And so the thing that I was thinking is that maybe this whole satellite communication service that they might be able to provide, it caters to low latency, right? Low latency international connectivity applications. And so, you and I, we talked about the undersea cables, right? And fiber under the sea, that going from New York to maybe London, you have this large latency. Maybe what this satellite network is going to be really differentiated in is providing that intercontinental, if you will, real-time communications. And it doesn't necessarily have to be broadband. It can be low band. It's just what you're doing is you are conveying small packets of data that are high value and very low latency between point A and point B. And so one of the things you mentioned was financial trading, and that would be another application that might bring in some high margin business for Starlink. And the other thing I think to consider here is that this whole intercontinental low latency capability, maybe we invent a acronym for that, kind of like URLLC, right? Maybe we just put like a IC in the front of that. That's probably a realm for a lot of creative thinking. And I think there's applications that can come out of it, not only in the commercial space, but also in the military, right? One of the things that I mentioned is, the reason why we don't have drones on aircraft carriers is because connectivity, and resiliency of communications. And maybe this is one of the ways, and you need to have sort of real-time communications, especially if it's a very expensive fighter plane that you are operating off of in a remote theater. That's another possibility. And so who knows, maybe it's a great opportunity for Elon Musk to get into the military comms business.
Big business.
Yeah, not small dinero, right?
It's,
So those are the things that we kind of batted back and forth, right?
some of those bats that we have a lot of subsidies on that. In the case of the military, we don't need to be an insider to analyze the numbers. I mean, if we get some of the current satellite companies and we analyze the breakdown of their addressable markets, we are going to find that the government in general, it's like 1/3 of some of those geo satellite service providers. Okay,
Right,
so
right.
all revenue of the service providers, 1/3 goes to government and military. So that's an area that Elon Musk will for sure explore And when we analyze the other areas that we have today on the existing satellite service providers, we are going to find maritime, we are going to find oil rigs, we are going to find mobile sites backhauls. And some of those guys, they may see the value of the low latency that Starlink may offer. So today, they are happy with the geo capacity, with geo throughput, but they are not completely happy with the 500 milliseconds of round trip, right?
Absolutely.
So then when you get an offer of like the same capacity with a little bit better latency, potentially those backhaul type of use cases may pay a little bit more for the LEO service compared to the GEOs. So it will be interesting. So I think that his battlefields will be very diverse. Like he will have a battlefield, of course, on the rural broadband. He will have a battlefield against the current GEO use cases. He may find a new battlefield on when he can compete with the long distance fibers, like we discussed that, right? The subsea cables and all that. He may find like in all those different battlefields opportunities to have some premium. I told you that
exactly.
One of the most curious use cases that I heard about was exactly the fact that some guys don't like their packets to travel on terrestrial networks. It's not the end-to-end controlled, that they don't know the end-to-end physical path. So the reason for that is that you have IPR involved. So if you would like to transfer IPR from one branch office to another branch office, okay, you may not put that on an encrypted VPN into the cloud, because inside the cloud, nobody really knows the physical path of the packet, right?
Right.
And those satellites, they can offer a predictable path. So they can say, hey, from this branch, the information will go to that specific satellite. From that specific satellite, I'm going to send it to another satellite. From that other satellite, I send it down. To the other branch. So that type of predictable physical path can help him also to have some specific premium for those use cases. So it will be interesting. I think that there are a lot of potential for the LEOs. We didn't even discuss, for example, the data centers on the space. There are companies that are only thinking about the LEOs as CDNs on the space. So that's another use case that we didn't even think about it. But there are some companies only investing on putting computing and the storage capacity on the space to work as a flying data center.
Or edge node, a satellite edge node.
Will be the earth, in the edge of the earth.
Edge of the earth, exactly. That's crazy. So you heard it here first. Intercontinental, ultra reliable, low latency communications, right? They heard it here first. That's you and me, buddy.
That's true. That's true.
It was great fun. I'm just so glad that I managed to get you on. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your great thinking and thought leadership. And I'm sure it'll be invaluable to our listeners and our viewers. And so thank you. And we'll have to have you on again. Maybe we'll talk about the satellite edge node thing and satellite CDNs.
I would love to talk about everything. And one of the areas that I'm exploring a lot now is the fact that the rural broadband in the US is actually a digital transformation driver. So we see like the top consulting companies as being the brand of the digital transformation, right? But the reality is that the local ISP technician is the one that is teaching that small restaurant how to go online. And that's the real digital transformation. That digital transformation happening in front of me. And I'm trying to explore more on how to promote those guys that are doing a beautiful work in rural America.
And there you have it. Virgilio Fiorese. Hey, thank you so much, my friend. And we will see you next time. You stay safe, you stay healthy, and stay away from that barn, okay?
Man, if you see the real barns here in Indiana that I'm in now, they're like that, man. So I love that, and I love I love you will know what I'm saying. I love the smell of the rural America. So
Yeah.
when you get outside of the office and you see all those cows and all that, you can see the smell of rural America. That's great, man.
I think that's called, they call it a cow pie. All right, man. We'll see you later, okay? Take care, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Visit us at www.next-curve.com.